All right, welcome to our sound for video session. Today is the 22nd of March, 2020. Let's do a sound check here first. I am using today the Rode NT USB Mini. Let's just show you that here real quick. And this is going to be way out of sync, I just realized, because I forgot to apply the settings. Okay, let's go back here. There we are. Okay, so we're way out of sync. I realize that. I apologize in advance. I am checking to see if there's a way I can change that right now while we're doing the session. The thing is that I'm using a USB microphone and I'm using a separate external camera. This is a Canon C200. That's coming into a Blackmagic A10 Mini. So there's some latency coming out of the camera via HDMI. That's natural and normal for any camera that's got an HDMI output. And then it comes into the A10 Mini here, and there is probably some additional latency that's introduced here as it converts it and sends it via USB to the computer. Now, this microphone is connected directly to the computer, and there is a way to apply an audio delay, and let's just see if we can do that right now. Looks like we can. Okay. All right, so now I've applied an audio delay of 7 frames, and everyone says that things are sounding okay. All right. And so we're now on the, just watching the comments go by here. Some good stuff there. So let's do a clap test here. Let me just clap and you tell me how in sync we are. I put an audio delay of 7 frames, which is what appeared to be what was necessary with this particular setup in my offline testing. So here we go. Whoops. Gotta stand right there. How'd that look in terms of sync? Let's see. Now, okay. Okay, well, we'll 7 frame delay seems to be okay. All right, so if you notice anything funny, let us know here, but we're going to go ahead and dive into the questions, and then we'll come back to the chat and tackle those questions as well. So thanks everyone for joining. Hope everybody's doing well, staying healthy, and staying mentally healthy as well. Things are a little rough at the moment in the world, but let me just run through a couple things. So I was going to do this review of this microphone today, the Rode NT USB Mini. The reason I didn't is that I've had allergies and it turned into kind of a sinus infection, and so even now my voice is still off. So don't judge the microphone too harshly based on what you're hearing today. My voice is a little bit off. I'm still got some congestion I'm working through. So apologize for sharing all the details, but I just want to kind of give that disclaimer first. And so that's why I've delayed the review of the NT USB Mini. I think it's actually going to be a pretty good microphone for people who are kind of desperate to get into live streaming and doing a lot of Skype calls and things of that nature. It's fairly affordable at $99. The audio quality is so much better than almost any camera mic or webcam mic, and you can obviously get it much closer. Now, the one caveat I will say is that it comes with this charming little stand, which is actually quite clever. It has a rubber gasket that fits into the bottom of the microphone. In fact, I've got one over here. Let me grab it and I'll show you. Okay, we're going to go up to this view here. Move my microphone. There might be a little bit of sound that comes with that. And we're going to refocus. There we go. Okay. So it comes with this little mic stand that connects via a fairly strong magnet. You can see, well, you have to pull it apart. It holds on pretty nicely there. Clever design, kind of neat. And then what happens is on the bottom here, this is a kind of a rubber gasket that fits in on the bottom, and you can push that out. And then you have a regular 5/8 inch thread here, or it also comes with a 5/8 to 3/8 inch thread, so you can attach it to a microphone stand, whether the kind, the 5/8 inch, which is more common in the United States, and the 3/8 inch, which is more common everywhere else. So my recommendation, though, for people that get this microphone is that you really probably do want to put it on a stand a little bit closer to you. So let's go ahead and pop that back on there. Whoops, bumped the microphone. We'll come back over here. All right. Now, the reason the reason I didn't do the review this week was because my voice. And I always try to get more people on, but since we're doing social distancing, it's basically my wife and my daughter and I. So we'll do that, and that's probably what we'll work on this week. But in lieu of that, I had a conversation with, some of you may know, Bandrew Scott over at another YouTube channel called Podcasted. She does a lot of microphone reviews, audio interface reviews, audio gear reviews. And he's a podcaster, and he's also a musician. He mainly a guitarist. So he does some really good microphone reviews. And the thing that's good about the way he does the microphone reviews is that he's very systematic, does basically the same thing every time. So it's really easy to compare, at least for his voice, from mic to mic to mic by just pulling up multiple of his reviews and putting them in different tabs on your browser, and you can play back and forth between them. So anyway, he came over onto the channel, and Rob, thank you. I know I saw you just a bit earlier. Rob recommended that we do this interview here, or this particular session, and we were actually also going to have Mike Delgadio from the Booth Junkie YouTube channel. He is a voiceover artist, and he does also microphone reviews in the context of voiceover. And unfortunately, Mike wasn't available, but the question was, why is it that different people that have a lot of experience with a lot of different microphones have different opinions when they're talking about the same microphone? And so that's what the main session, or the session over on my main channel, was about today. So if you're interested in that, there's hopefully some good information for you. All right, let's jump into the questions for today. Let's go ahead and go up here. All right, first off from Alex. I have started production sound fundamentals. That's one of my courses. With regards to sound, I plan to use the following setup. MixPre 6, as I understood from the course, MixPre 3 only has only XLR inputs. That's correct. It does not have the 1/4-inch XLR combination jacks, just XLR. Also be using 2 Deity S-Mic 2s. I don't know if that's the longer version or the shorter version. You say S-Mic 2s. I don't know if that's 2s plural or 2S. In any case, yes, those are good for indoor interview shooting with, that should be great with cables, and for recording audio for lectures with the Deity Connect HD TX. That, I think, is a fine choice. Recording with Deity Connect and lav mics through MixPre 6 to camera or external recorder, such as an Atomos Ninja. And his question is, what can be done better within this price range, more or less? Which cables do I need to record from MixPre to Atomos Ninja? Can it be good enough for professional level quality? I think the answer is yes, of course it can be good. In fact, there are professional news organizations that use gear that's not that nice. So yes, certainly professional results with that, I think. I think you have a great choice. The MixPre 6 is great. The Deity S-Mic 2 or 2S, whichever one you're choosing there, also good. Deity HD TX can be good for recording lectures if you have a lecturer who's moving around a little bit. And whether they're going to be using a handheld microphone or a lavalier microphone with that can be great. And I would actually generally, in regards to your MixPre 6 to camera or external recorder, you can go either way. I would generally probably just go through the camera. That'll avoid any sort of sync issues. And you can go to the Ninja. If you do go to the Ninja, you're going to have to apply an audio delay as well, just like we did on the session here today, because the audio will get to the Atomos Ninja before the video camera's video signal will. So they'll be out of sync. You can, within the Atomos Ninja, you can apply a delay on the audio, and you'll just have to experiment with several times. And generally what I would do is a clap test. So have your have your whole setup, everything set up, MixPre, microphones, feeding into the Atomos Ninja, and also your camera feeding into the Atomos Ninja. Record on all of them, clap, and then play back the footage from the Atomos Ninja, see how far out of sync they are in terms of number of frames, and then you can apply that offset in the Atomos Ninja. So that is one thing you can do. What kind of cable do you need? Atomos sells Well, you're going from a Mix Pre 6 to the Atomos Ninja. I don't know if the Ninja has a 3.5 millimeter input. I don't recall. But what you're going to have is you're going to have an unbalanced 3.5 millimeter output from the Mix Pre 6. And then you'll need to determine if you have a 3.5 millimeter TRS input on the Ninja. If you do, that's just a 3.5 millimeter TRS stereo mini jack cable, which is pretty common, easy to find. If it's only got the, I think they have a LEMO connector on there that allows you to break it out to 2 different XLR inputs. If you've got that, I would probably just go into the camera just to save yourself some grief and additional adapter cables. I don't think you're going to see a big difference in terms of quality going into the Atomos versus going into your camera, depending on your camera. But generally, I think it's going to be about the same. You're using the Mix Pre for the heavy lifting and doing most of the work. So I guess the one advantage potentially with the Atomos is you could probably set it to line level input as opposed to microphone level input. I feel like I'm digging into the weeds here now at this point, but hopefully this is helpful, Alex. So what you'll need to do is, first of all, figure out what kind of inputs you have on the Ninja. If you do have a 3.5 millimeter input, I think that's going to be pretty straightforward. If it has only XLR inputs with the adapter cable from Atomos, it's going to be a little bit more, it's going to take just more adapting. But by that I mean either adapters or adapter cables that you'll need to get your unbalanced output from the Mix Pre 6 into the Atomos Ninja. In that case, I would probably recommend just going into the camera. Then your question, what can be done better with this within this price range? Which cables do I need to record? We talked about that a little bit. Can it be good enough for professional quality? We answered that. Yes, it can. What can be done better within this price range? I think you're pretty much at a point where you're doing really well with what you've allocated. I don't see any massive improvements you can make on any of those. So I'm actually thinking you're in a pretty good shape there. So it's just a matter of, once you have all of that, doing plenty of testing to make sure you understand how it all works. So hopefully that helps. All right, next question is from Alan M. And let me just give you a little background. Here he's posted a link to a YouTube channel. We'll put that down below afterwards so you can go see it. But in essence, what he has here is a sort of a documentary style video where he follows these blacksmiths that they're usually out in these fields and stuff, and they make stuff. They use molten iron and they pour and things into forms and makes, I don't know all the right terms. I'm not a blacksmith, but in any case, that's kind of the background. So he says, it took a half dozen passes to get the audio anything close to publishable. I use Audio-Technica M50 headphones and Audacity to treat my voiceover. Oh yeah, and that I should say that the audio on the video is 3 things. There's a music backing track. There is his voiceover, him kind of, I think, after the fact is my guess, kind of explaining what's happening. And then there's also the audio from when he's there on location for the blacksmiths talking amongst each other and so on and so forth. So amongst that's kind of the background. The difficult part is equalizing that with the audio footage, external camera mic Sennheiser MKE 400 on a GH5 in Premiere Pro, then mixing so the music track fits as well. I kept having to alter the gain when I reviewed it, all without headphones coming out of an iMac. The voiceover was too boomy and bass heavy, I think. I thought I was going to have to start over again at one point. There are obvious abrupt changes during the music section, which I guess can be graded later, but I don't know what technique yet. I suppose my question is, since I'm not taking an external recorder with me when filming, can you suggest an external on-camera mic that would pick up dialogue of both me on camera and the person I'm filming, who I guess has to be one social distance away? All right, let's stop. Let's pause there and talk about that for just a minute. Let me switch the camera back over here. Sorry, you're picking up, that's my mouse moving around. I think we're hearing that in the microphone as well. All right, so right now you have a directional microphone, the Sennheiser MKE 400, that's aimed at the person that you're aiming the camera at. So the trick with by the way, also, apologies, you probably will hear some trumpet in the background because we have a university student at home for the term because of the world circumstances, and she chose now to practice trumpet. So, all right, so I think the challenge is that you basically have one microphone input on your Panasonic GH5, and you are essentially asking, how can I mic 2 separate things at the same time? So You could use something like a Beach Tech makes a variety of audio adapters, which are basically miniature mixers that sit on top of your camera. You could do something like that. So you could be wearing a lavalier microphone and you could still have the Sennheiser MKE 400 aimed at the person you're filming. That's going to add to your camera rig. So there's a little extra weight there and a little extra bulk. That's one of the obvious options that come to mind. Another thing you could do is you could use a dual channel wireless system. It's a little overkill for wireless and perhaps a kind of a much more expensive way to go, but something like the Deity Connect HD, the interview kit that has both a plug-on transmitter. Well, no, that wouldn't work for your Sennheiser MKE 400. Technically it would, but I don't know, it just seems like overkill. You could use a dual channel wireless system. One channel would be transmitting basically from the camera to the camera, which doesn't make sense. So yeah, I would stay away from that. That's a bad solution. I think an audio adapter that's basically a miniature mixer would be your best bet. And then you can use a lavalier microphone on yourself and the MKE 400 aimed at whomever you're filming. So those are my initial thoughts. If anyone else has other ideas, yeah, definitely let us know in the chat here. And then you go on to say, for what I do basic narrative without speed ramps or animation, I'm wondering if Final Cut Pro might be better. In parentheses, I've only heard that, no experience. As Premiere Pro crashed at one point and I had to start the edit again. Now I have time to learn stuff and new software is probably easier to get than groceries. I think you're probably right. It's easier to get software these days than groceries. But couple things. Final Cut Pro is the editing app I use. I have used Premiere in the past. I haven't used it for a number of years, but I've heard on Mac that Premiere Pro it doesn't perform as well as it used to be. That's what I hear. I don't know. Haven't used it. But I will say that Final Cut Pro is not without its flaws and not without its blemishes as well, and it has crashed on me more than once. So don't expect that you're going to solve that problem necessarily. Video editing apps do crash from time to time. For my experience most recently with the recent version of Final Cut Pro, it hasn't crashed much at all. I can't remember the last time it crashed within the last year. So it has been doing reasonably well. All right, back to mixing. You kind of alluded to it, but you didn't specifically ask about it. But mixing is an art, and there are a lot of things you can do there as well. With backing music tracks, there are a few different techniques. The very simple technique that you can use that's kind of quick and dirty is, I think what a lot of people run into is that they feel like they have to drop the music so low that it's almost, you can't hear it at all, so that you make sure that all the dialogue can be heard. And in your case, not only the voiceover dialogue, but also the on-location sound as well. And the idea with mixing at a very fundamental level is that you make room in one track so that another track, they're not contending with each other. That's a big, important principle to understand when mixing. And so, for example, with music, oftentimes I'll just use, for the very quick and dirty method, there's a much more sophisticated method as well, which we won't go into here, called sidechaining and sidechain compressing and sidechain EQing, but you can just use a regular old EQ plugin on the music track, and centered usually around about 1,000 hertz, 1 kilohertz, a really wide cut that goes across a lot of frequencies. And it sort of scoops out the middle of the music track, and it makes room for the voiceover and the on-location sound. And then likewise with the dialogue, you can have a high-pass filter that cuts off a lot of the low frequency and some of the high frequency, so it sort of sits in that little space that you've carved out of the music. Now, it sounds like it's going to be too destructive, and in fact, if you just listen to the dialogue track or you just listen to the music track after you've applied those EQ filters, they will sound weird. But when you mix them together, they will sit better together, and you don't have to turn the music down as much. So the music will still be present, people can hear it, but it won't be contending with the dialogue as much. So that is one thing to consider when it comes to mixing all of those. Also, mixing in Premiere or any video editing app is difficult to do. It doesn't really have a lot of the tools that it just doesn't have a lot of the tools that a dedicated digital audio workstation app has, audio editing app. So that's always going to be a little bit of a challenge. So thanks for the question, Alan. I really do appreciate that. Okay, switching back over to Keynote for our final question of the day that was submitted ahead of time. This is from Terrence. What audio equipment would you recommend for an international destination? Apparently not now. As an independent filmmaker, specifically to document daily life in a small native village, I would be using a Sony A7R4 or the A7S III. Well, first of all, you're going to have to get your hands on an A7S III. Don't think that one's been released yet, and I think that's why you put the happy face. But Terrence, I don't know a whole lot about what you're doing. I assume it's just you. You have one rig. It all needs to fit on the camera rig. Let's just assume that. If I'm wrong, let me know, and we can talk about that as well. But I would go with probably something. Those two cameras have 3.5 millimeter microphone inputs, so you either need an audio adapter of some sort, so you can bring in better microphones. And I don't know if you're just going to use a camera top. If you're just going to use a camera top microphone, just go get a Deity D3 Pro or a Rode NT. What's it called? Video Mic NTG, and just go with that. I mean, that's the simplest solution. But if you're looking for something that's a little more robust than that, then something like a MixPre or a Zoom F6 attached to the bottom of your camera rig could be good. And both of those have the ability to attach to a camera rig. Of course, you're adding weight. And I don't know if you're going to be using any lavalier microphones, if you're going to be doing any interviews. If you are, then that'll give you some additional input. So you could use something like a maybe a Sennheiser G4 system if you wanted to go kind of prosumer. On the other prosumer, well, the problem with that is if you're traveling, you have to make sure you get the right frequencies. So be careful with that. You could go with AVX, which should be legal to use in almost any country. You could go with a Deity Connect microphone, wireless microphone system. It's a dual channel system, which also, excuse me, should be available or legal to use in any country. So that's an option as well. And then as far as boom microphones, again, if you're trying to get something that's not just a regular camera top shotgun microphone, the problem is if you're going to mount it on your camera anyway, I generally don't find there to be a huge advantage to mounting a really expensive shotgun microphone on top of your camera. They're longer, so they may be a little bit more directional. So there's that advantage, but it's a lot more unwieldy as well because, here, for example, here's a pretty standard size kind of what I would call a medium shotgun microphone these days. They used to call them short shotguns, but now there's this whole new category of short. That's the Sennheiser MKH416. And if I don't have a GH5 available that I can show it next to, but that's approaching 12 inches. So it's not a short. It's kind of unwieldy if you put that on top of a camera, honestly. So I would probably just go with like a Video Mic NTG or a D3 Pro from Deity. If we totally missed the mark and you meant something else and you're going to be working in a different way, please definitely let us know. Definitely interested to help out there. All right, let's go to the chat here and see what we've got. We've got Daniel James. Looking forward to this session in particular because I'm a big Rode equipment fan. Well, Daniel, I hope this is giving you a good test. Again, disclaimer, still getting over a little bit of some allergies and sinus infections, so be careful. Take that into account with what you're hearing here. You'll notice I did put in place here. We'll switch really quickly here. Go ahead and get some focus there. Okay. I have here a pop filter, sort of the kind of like the nylon mesh that's in front of it. Now, one of the things about the Rode NT USB Mini was that they say, okay, there's an internal pop filter, so you don't need an external one. Well, I've actually found that you generally do. Let me just show you here. If I say Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers, I don't know if it popped that time. Maybe if you get really close. Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. Or as Bandrew says, please bring pizza pronto. I think it does still need a little bit of pop filtering there, at least for my voice. So just be aware of that if you are looking at this particular mic. Oh, there's Daniel. Sorry, didn't put you up on the screen yet. If you are looking at this mic, there is an inbuilt pop filter, but I think you might need more depending on how explosive your P's and B's are when you say those. So, all right. This is a question from Alarm Clock Films. I was looking at putting the Ambisonics plugin on my MixPre 10.2 and saw that it was $50. Didn't it used to be free? I believe that when it first came out, it was free, yes. And incidentally, the prices on the MixPre series, the 2 series, just went up as well. So I will say this. So one thing you need to keep in mind with sound devices, and I don't know, it's different than most consumer products. I think people are a little surprised sometimes. Sound devices operates in a fairly tight niche. So they don't operate like a typical consumer grade company or consumer products company, where typically with consumer products, once a manufacturer has recouped, so they set an initial price on a product when they launch it, and part of that built into that is generally is a means to recoup their engineering costs, all their design and engineering costs, and that can actually be fairly substantial depending on what it is. And then once they've gotten past that point, basically what they have left is support, maintenance, doing firmware updates, and manufacturing. And so they can oftentimes reduce the price a little bit after they've sold enough units. Now, Zoom, for example, a lot of times the prices on their recorders go down over time. With sound devices, it's generally the opposite, especially on their pro level gear, where the support costs are actually pretty high. And I don't know, I don't have any insight into the specific sound devices business, but as a product manager in my day job, my understanding is they're far more niche. So they never get really the scales of manufacturing benefits that a lot of consumer electronics companies get. So a lot of times you're not going to see the prices come down. I don't know why the Ambisonics plugin was free at first and now it's $50. I don't know, but I think to confirm, yes, that's my understanding as well. When it first came out, it was free. Now it is not. So, all right, Todd, this is an interesting time. Reminder set, standing by. We do this a little different. We do kind of 2 different times, either noon, my time, Mountain Daylight, U.S. time, UTC -6 on Sundays, or at 8 p.m. And that's so that our friends from Europe and other parts of the world can join as well. All right, Tyler says hello to everybody. Glenn, hello from a sunny, oh, here he is, from a sunny evening in London. Glenn, thanks so much for joining. And Alex from Israel, thank you for joining us. And Rob, thank you for the recommendation to get together with Bandrew and Mike. Unfortunately, we weren't able to connect with Mike, but we did. Bandrew and I were able to talk a little bit, and I hope you found that helpful. It was an interesting topic for sure. And hello to Alejandro. Thanks for joining us here. All right, good health to everyone from Alan. And Daniel, thanks. Hello from California. All right, we're going to skip. Everyone confirmed that we had pretty decent audio here. Here, loud and clear. You're slightly out of sync, barely noticeable from the start. Okay, and then we did the little sync change there. And hopefully that's looking okay. All right. Sorry for the delay here, just getting through. Kevin, the basic filmmaker made it. You're off by 0.012 frames. Looks okay. I say live with it, pal. Teeny bit off, Alan says. Okay, well, we'll work on fine-tuning that again some more. I'm just going to do another clap here just to so I can use this in post to check it out. All right. It's amazing how you sound different on that one. Sorry, you sound different than on the one you just have just used with Bandrew. Microphone, I assume you're talking about, Paul. He says this here. Yeah, every microphone is voiced differently, so even the same voice. Now, keep in mind, as I said, still getting over this infection. When I talked to Bandrew, that was actually a little over a week ago. It was actually 9 days ago. That was before this set in. So part of it is my own voice sounding different, but at that time. So that's a factor as well. All right, Kevin, the basic filmmaker, still racking up data charges on that phone, or is your internet working again? I hope, yes. Kevin, let's all send some good vibes Kevin's way. He's having some hard times with internet, but I don't know if he's working on his phone at this point or he got the home internet worked out. All right, good to see you. How did you adjust the audio and video sync in Ecamm? Great question. I can't actually show it, unfortunately, because Ecamm hides itself when you're doing a live stream. But let me just talk you through it. You go up to Ecamm Live, the menu up at the top. You choose Preferences, and then that opens a window. In that window, there's an Audio tab. You go to the Audio tab, and then about 3/4 of the way down there is a setting called Mic Delay. And it allows you to adjust from 0 frames to 10 frames of delay. So that's how you make the change in Ecamm Live. Good question. All right, finally working again, thanks. Just hit almost 96% and internet started working again. Okay, excellent. Glad to see you're back, Kevin. Daniel saw the video with Bandrew. Good stuff. Great, thank you. Oh, I have sinus infections too. Try to breathe vapor of eucalyptus and rosemary. Good luck. Thank you. We've been doing things like that and it's been helping. So Alexander says, I use the Rode Lav mics and interview kit. Okay. Those are actually pretty useful. It's funny. The Rode Link wireless microphone system came out, gosh, 5 or 6 years ago now, and it's actually still not a bad option if you want to use a 2.4 gigahertz system. So, Kevin, did you get Glenn's coffee donation? I hope. Bandrew video was spectacular. It certainly did. Thank you. Short. Hi, Alan. Alan Tepper is here. Alan is my friend. We've done a couple of podcasts together. Alan, it's great to have you here. And yes, we are healthy and safe, and I hope the same for you and your family and everybody out there. Stay safe, everybody. All right. By the way, good evening, morning, afternoon. All right. Rob did not know that Rode had an interview kit. Need to look it up. So yes, they do. As part of their Rode Link system, they have an interview kit, but they also have a kit you can adapt an XLR microphone to your iOS device, so your iPhone or iPad, which I actually used at NAB a couple of years ago as my recording setup. The only issue was that the phone sometimes would hiccup, so I'd get these kind of crackly things where essentially it seemed like samples were being dropped or something was happening during the recording. But if you can get your phone working reliably, it can be a good way to do it. Don't know if now is the time, but amazed with audio video with Bandrew. Love to hear about that setup. Looked live to me, at least the switching. So that was actually recorded via Skype. The video was recorded via Skype, and that's why actually some people have noted that the frame rates looked funny, and they did indeed. And I think one thing I forgot to ask was Bandrew to use the same frame rate I was using, and also it seems like Skype does some funny things with frame rates as well. And actually, to be honest, I think Ecamm Live does some funny things too. I don't think it supports the fractional frame rates. So for example, technically my cameras are set to 23.976 currently. I think it only supports 24. So it does this hashing thing, this weird, it tries to convert, which is doesn't ever work out well. And even when I've set my camera to 24, it still did something to them. So I'm not really sure. Oh, I've got this wonderful cable hanging in here. Sorry about that. So yeah, it can do some funny things. So that one was not live. That was actually shot, as I say, 9 days ago. We used a couple things. So we used Skype for the video. That's how I recorded the video on my end. Skype is nice from the standpoint that it uses an NDI technology. So you can actually record both sides of the conversation to separate 720p streams, and that's what we did. And then for audio, we actually did not record with Skype. We used CleanFeed, and CleanFeed produced some better quality audio. In addition to that, Bandrew also recorded locally on his side, and so I was able to use that as well. CleanFeed did actually cut out at one point, very, very minimally for a very short period of time. So I did actually end up using the track that Bandra recorded locally on his side and then cut that all together. And that was a bit of a, there's some challenges there for sure, piecing all that together, but it was not a live stream. So it looks like the live stream again, I think mainly because the Skype video kind of did that weird frame rate stuff. So, all right. Alexander's talking about something for iPhone. Let me just go back and see if I can find that short. Rode lav mics and interview kit. Okay, that may be the interview kit. You're talking about the iXLR, I think it's called, from Rode. I have it right here, in fact. Let's pull it up. Oh, it's going to involve moving a C stand and camera. Basically, what it is, it's a little thing that looks like a plug-on transmitter. So it has XLR on one side and a little control box with a dial on it, and then a cable that's hard cabled in that goes to your iPhone with a lightning connector. So that's what the iXLR looks like. All right, keep on going here. E67, hello from Moscow. Thanks for joining us. Rob also talks about iRig lavs. They have the ability to daisy chain to do the same thing. Interesting. All right. And I don't know Russian, but Glenn evidently does and is welcoming, I think, our friend E67. So good to see that. Rob just won a Deity vlog. If you follow the Deity YouTube channel, you will know that Rob I think you say Christensen. I'm not sure. Christiansen. I apologize if I've said that wrong, but he did just win a vlog over there on the Deity channel. Congratulations on that. Not sure if that's right, but apart from that and yet, that's all I've got. Nice try, Glenn. I mean, good effort, definitely. All right. Florian, thanks for joining us. All right. Rob suggests when I talked about my daughter practicing trumpet, I think she may be done now, that she, maybe your daughter could play you in and out of the next stream like your own house band. Well, we we actually are going to probably record some instruments with this in our review this week. So trumpet, violin, maybe some piano. Got a few different options there. So we'll definitely join forces and do what we can. Also, earlier this last week, we did do a live stream on the main channel about online music lessons and kind of the very basics of live streaming. But I think I need to go back and do a live streaming video that's a little bit more in depth, but still focused on the fundamentals, because I think a lot of people are trying to do live streaming now, but are kind of at a loss as to where to start. And there are a lot of, you can make live stream setups very, very complex very quickly, or you can go very simple and just use a webcam basically. So we'll run through the whole thing. He could record his iPhone and sync it up later if really needed. Depends on whether Alex would be on camera or not. That's a good point. I have found some challenges with syncing phone recorded audio in some cases. So just one thing to watch out for. Do plenty of testing ahead of time, but definitely some possibilities there. Daughter playing trumpet, sweet. Free background music. Tell her she sounds great. I will. All right. And Alan, thanks for your question today. All right. Maybe Alex can plug a splitter cable so he can plug different mics and get two channels left and right. That is a possibility as well. The advantage of a mixer, of course, is you can adjust the levels of the different microphones so that they come in right. If you don't do that, you're going to have a real challenge in post, kind of leveling things. So that's something you'd want to watch for. But yes, if you want to keep it very cheap and very light, a splitter cable may be able to do that as well. Kevin is sharing some wisdom with us, everybody. Let's have just a moment here where we look at Kevin's wisdom. No editor is perfect, so chasing the better editor is like snipe hunting, in my humble opinion. Could not agree more, Kevin. Thank you so much. There are reasons to change editors. I'm not sure that that Premiere crashing is a good reason to change to Final Cut Pro 10, but if you have other reasons that you want to do that, there are plenty of other good reasons to do the switch. One thing I like about Final Cut Pro 10 is it's a one-time charge and you're done. So if you don't need all of the other Adobe tools, then it's going to be a whole lot cheaper to go Final Cut Pro 10 if you are on a Mac, of course. So one thought there. But yes, totally agree, Kevin. Here, Adam talks about this. So an adapter cable, basically, you could get a Y cable and get two microphones into the same camera. That is a possibility. Again, with the caveats we talked about before, where you won't be able to adjust the levels of the two different mics necessarily. All right. I think the Rode NT USB Mini sounds very good, very clean. It's not a bad sound. I'm pretty happy with it. Can be. She sells seashells by the seashore. I don't know what you guys think of that in terms of sibilants, but my sibilant voice can kind of put that to the test. Love to hear your comments in the chat there, if you've got them. All right. Alejandro, Curtis, I may have asked this at one point before, but how does one go about daisy chaining two audio recorders at the same time, more specifically the F8? Also, what kind of syncing is required, jam or internal? Well, you can go about it a couple different ways. You can basically use one as a mixer and feed the mix into the other. That's one way you can go about it. Or you can jam sync the two of them together and then bring all the audio together in post. So if you just use the output on one F8 to the input on the other F8, go to the timecode menu and jam the one that has the input connected from the other one. So then you can jam the two of them up. The timecode will be the same on both of them. And then in post, you will be able to sync those two audio files or wave files together using timecode. So it depends on which editor you're using, but basically I think, for example, if you bring in a video clip and then the two audio clips, highlight all of them, right click, it'll usually be an option like sync via timecode, and that should line them all right back up. So that's the general idea there. The other way, again, as I mentioned before, is where you're using one F8 as a mixer, mixing a bunch of microphones down to a stereo mix, and then you send that stereo mix out into two inputs on the other F8, and then record those. So the problem with that, of course, is you don't get isolated tracks. You have a mix that's already kind of baked in. But depending on what you're doing, that could be an appropriate way to approach it. So a little simpler. Are there any light C stands? What I see is very heavy. That's a good question. There aren't. I mean, depends on what you mean by light. Light's relative, but let me just pull something up here. At B&H, there is something that's lighter, but not a ton lighter. It's a little less bulky, but let me just pull it up here and show you. There's a Triad Orbit makes it's actually a microphone stand system, but it can actually be used for other things as well. Let's just bring it over here so you can see this here. Let me find one of the stands here. Here we go. So it's a bit smaller, but what's interesting about it, we'll pull up, see if we can make it a little bigger here. The base here is, that's solid metal right there, so it's actually quite heavy. So it acts as a ballast and makes it so that it's less likely to tip over than a typical microphone stand. And you can also adjust the legs to kind of change the way it's tilted. It's an interesting system. They have a lot of accessories that go with it too, so you can mount various things. I wouldn't really use it for big lights or anything like that, like you would a C-stand, but if you're trying to boom a microphone, you could probably do that. And there are a variety of different boom arms, things of that nature. So if you're doing it would have to be a fairly tight shot to be able to use this boom system because they're not especially long. But you can do all sorts of crazy stuff with them as well. So there's one option to consider. I don't know of another that's a lot lighter weight, but the C-stands you have to keep in mind are for when you need to mount something that's a little heavier. So if you just need a light on a stand, one of those travel folding stands can be just perfectly fine. As soon as you're going to boom it, that's when you need something that's heavier and has a little bit more ballast and weight to it to keep it from tipping over. So some thoughts there. All right, Zach says that the Rode NT USB Mini is sounding good. And there was some definitely popping there, okay, in our pop test. It's popping without the external pop filter. Yeah, I thought so. Okay, Adam also suggests back to Terrence's question. Maybe he can use a Shure VP83F micro camera plus the Y splitter cable plus a Rode Wireless Go. That's a possibility as well. Thank you, Adam. I really appreciate you kind of digging in. That's a good point. I want to underscore. Here's another thing on the same theme. Why can different people come up with different solutions? Well, it just depends on how you like to work. And so I'm really, really appreciative, Adam, here, for example, for you sharing your perspective, because that is another very valid way to go about solving that problem. And it might be something that works really well for Terrence. For me, the way I would do it, probably would have used a mixer, just a battery powered mixer, lavalier on me, MKE 400 towards the action, and just would have gone with it that way. So, but I think both approaches are totally valid. And so thanks again for the community input here. It really is helpful. All right. Powell says, if Alan doesn't use an external recorder, is external audio add-on really a viable option? Pricey and heavy. Maybe some simple 2-channel lav mic. I guess if he can afford an MK400, he can use a Zoom H5. Well, I was just trying to solve the problem with the existing hardware that he has. Hear that airplane? Evidently someone's flying really low today. Don't touch the face, sorry. All right, thanks for the reminder. Talking to myself. Alan doesn't have, I don't know that an external audio recorder could be a viable option as well. So that would basically replace the audio adapter / mixer that I had recommended. Very valid approach as well. So definitely could do that as well. So lots of ways to skin a cat, as they say. Actually, I don't like that term. I don't want to skin any cats. I can't think of a good term. Just a great way to solve two problems. How about that? All right, Rob says, I think that's what they are designed to be. I do believe you can get baby C-stands and they'd be lighter. Yeah, there are some that aren't as tall. Definitely. Good point, Rob. Thanks for bringing that up. So yeah, that is going to make them somewhat lighter and not as bulky and difficult to get around. Alexander asks, can a USB mic be connected to the MixPre? This one cannot, no. The MixPre does not have a USB microphone input capability. I don't think. It has the ability to connect as a USB audio interface. I have never plugged this in to see if that would work. Has anyone else tried it? But last time I talked to somebody who tried doing something like that, they couldn't get it to work. So I don't think it works. It's certainly not designed to do that. So there are some USB mics that also have XLR outputs. So for example, the Audio-Technica ATR 2100X, the Samsung Q2U also have XLR outputs. So that way you could use it both ways. You could use it as a USB microphone directly into your computer, or you could send it out via XLR to your MixPre. So to answer your question there. All right. Alan has a MixPre 3, but use it in studio only. I made the choice for convenience, especially when filming in a Kevlar suit. Yeah, that's tough because you're following the blacksmiths around and you're getting really close to very hot material. I would think that gear is going to be coming down in the next year. People will be spending less on non-essentials if they've been out of work for a long time due to COVID-19 impacts. I think that's definitely true for consumer products. Again, for sound devices, which is a little bit more niche, I don't know if that'll be true. All right. Adam asks, I have a question. Did you try to plug a wireless receiver in the aux mic TRS input of the MixPre 6.2, 5 and 6 channels? Is it as good as the XLR inputs? I have done that, yes. It is. It's good. I don't remember if it has the same amount of gain, so it's not the same thing, of course. It's an unbalanced input as opposed to a balanced input. But it seemed good. I had no problems in terms of bringing a wireless microphone feed in there, but I'm curious if anyone else has had any problems or other impressions. But yeah, it's good. It's unbalanced, so you don't want to run a long cable from a wireless receiver into the 3.5 millimeter aux input. But not bad. No problems at all. Alan Moore, fine now with the clapping. Okay. Was perfect clap here. Okay, looks like that sync did the job there. All right, Edgar is serving on the board of a senior retirement center. The CEO needs a simple system he can use to record or stream throughout this organization, self-operated by one who would be more technically challenged. I think this could be a very fine choice for that. You plug it in. Let me actually show you my screen here. Coming back to the Mac. And I'm going to pull up preferences. If I go into the sound panel, all I have to do on input is choose the Rode NT USB Mini and adjust the gain right here. So it's really simple to use. I don't know that it gets much simpler than that. So in regards to your question, Edgar, I hope that this is really one that could potentially help in that situation. That's why I recommend it. A lot of people have been asking, what mic should I get? I need to do a live stream, or I need to do conference calls, or so on and so forth. Zach says that I use OBS, which also has an audio offset function. I believe that's true. And also there is another one. There's a kind of an offshoot of OBS called Streamlabs. I don't know if that one has the audio offset. I assume it does as well. But yes, that is something that is available in almost all of them. Alan, Sound Devices Amazonic plugin may not be needed, designed only for the Sennheiser Ambio. Other mics like the Rode SF1 can record all 4 channels and linked gains as raw A signals and do all 360 processing in post. Okay, so that's an interesting one to consider. I didn't realize that the Ambisonics plugin was only for the Sennheiser Ambio. So that's good information. Alan, thanks so much for clarifying on that point. All right, Rob, thanks for the super chat. You and Bandro were great. Thanks again for the awesome episode, and thank you for the recommendation. That was a great idea. All right, Alejandro, besides alcohol swabs and rubbing alcohol that's being used to keep the gear clean, what's another alternative to rubbing alcohol? We've actually talked about this before, so apologies to people who have seen it before, but this is what I use. Actually, let's see if we can switch to the other camera here. Moving our microphone carefully. Getting in focus here. There we go. Unisolve is another thing. So these are little wipes individually packaged. They're actually medical wipes. They're used for removing adhesive from skin. And they work really, really well. I use this to keep my lavalier cables and heads clean, and also use it to clean the XLR cables at the end of a shoot. So Unisolve, available at most drugstores, and I got this on Amazon, as I recall. So that's what I use there, Alejandro. All right. Would like to send you some coffee as well, Curtis. How do I go about it? I appreciate that, Glenn. Over on my website, learnlightandsound.com, there's a little donate button up at the top. Appreciate that. Thank you. Mike Kelly, when live streaming, is it worth it to keep the audio separate and dial in the delay? Or is it okay to just send your audio direct to camera and not worry about it? I think the answer, Mike, is from my point of view, it's okay to do both, whichever one you want to do. I would just do some testing ahead of time to see if you're hearing any difference. Whoops. Didn't mean to make that go away. So I think they're both legitimate. Normally what I do is I run the audio from my mix pre. I run the Shure SM7B into the mix pre, and then the mix pre goes via a balanced output from the mix pre. I'm using the 10 into the Canon C200, and then that gets fed into the A10 Mini with its audio. So that's typically what I do. Then I don't have to worry about sync. Today we're using the USB microphone. We've applied the frame offset of 7 frames, and I think that's a legitimate approach as well. I think that you're going to find that typically, in terms of complexity and cost, it's probably cheaper to go with a USB microphone, obviously, but I think both of them can be legitimate and valid. Hey, Lloyd, thanks for joining. Hope everything's good for you and yours. All right, Greg asks, is it realistic to get usable audio from a camera-mounted XLR indoor shotgun-style microphone about 1 to 2 meters from the interview subject? Any suggestions in the USD $1,000 range? All right, I think you have another comment here. I recently switched from using a Sony A9 to an FX9. Oh, the FX9 is a fancy big one, the full-frame cinema camera, if I remember right. I will still use my dual receiver Sony UWPD as the primary audio source, but I'd like to use a camera mounted mic as a backup for the subject. Okay, so that gives us some context here. I think, Greg, the reality is if you're 1 to 2 meters away, it's going to sound 1 to 2 meters away. The more directional your microphone, the better it's going to reject some of the ambient noise in the room. But the problem of mounting a microphone on top of a camera is that the pattern generally widens the farther it gets away from your camera. And what that means is that any sound behind the talent will get picked up. So if you're in a room, for example, and there's sound bouncing off the walls, anything coming from behind is still going to get picked up in that microphone. So, a Sennheiser MKH416 can do the job. My friend Scott Vanderbilt, he came out and shot some of the videos we did at NAB several years ago now, in 2016, I guess it was. Very kindly came out and did that. He was using a Sony FS5 with an MKH416 on top of the camera, and then I had a handheld dynamic interview mic in my hands. We ended up using the dynamic handheld mic in pretty much every situation. The idea was that the shotgun was there in case anything went awry, and we didn't end up using it. It did have a lot more ambiance in it, so I would use it. Yeah, I think an MKH416 would be a fine sort of backup camera mic, but I would expect that most of the time you're going to be using your Sony audio. So definitely something to keep in mind. Or if you're doing sit-down interviews and you have the time to run a cable, I'd boom that Sennheiser MKH416 out over the person being interviewed, and then that gives you some better options as well. So some thoughts there. Okay. Wait, did I miss one? No, I didn't. Okay. Coming back to Aram. I heard a pro uses vocal line to combine lav and boom sound to get a fuller voice. I heard about this on a podcast. Are there other options? That is actually the plugin I was trying to think of. I can't remember when we were talking about that. Was it last week or the week before? That was a plugin I couldn't remember the name of. So Vocal Line is it. And that is one that a lot of the post sound mixers will use to line things up. And yes, you can use that to get a fuller voice. The idea there is to get the two microphones in phase so that they're not destructively interfering with each other. And when you can do that, you can get a fuller voice, but don't expect necessarily, that's more of a problem solver from my point of view than it is a something that I would do all the time. I don't know the context of the conversation on this podcast you were listening to, but a lot of times, so for example, I heard the sound mixer and the post mixer for the movie 1917. They were talking about one particular scene where the boom had to be something like 4 or 5 meters away. It was a windy day. They were trying to get the sound. Of course, the actors were wearing lavalier microphones as well. And in post, what they ended up doing is they actually did end up combining the two microphones in that case. And I think what they did is they pulled a lot of the low frequency from the lavalier microphones and the high frequencies from the boom microphones. So there are lots of different ways you can go about combining them. But Vocal Line will help to kind of line them up. But you want to make sure they're in phase as well. So you may need to use some phase plugins to make sure they're lined up just right as well. So good one. Thanks for that, Aram. Thomas, music from Curtis's family, well recorded, would be a nice change from various celebrities' terrible on-camera audio in their home streams. All right. Well, we'll definitely work on it. Thank you, Thomas. Gary, how are you connected with today's stream? Are you using the USB connection or are you coming out of the headphone jack and connecting via 3.5? Gary, great question. I am going into USB into the computer. So the mic's going into the computer separate from the camera, which is coming through a Blackmagic A10 Mini, which is basically a capture card and a switcher all in one. So that's how we're connected today. And then we applied that offset of 7 frames to get them back into sync. And the way I did that was, prior to this session, I actually recorded locally on my streaming app, just did a clap test, played back the footage and realized, okay, the clap and the visual clap and the sound were off by 7 frames. So that's why we applied the 7 frame offset. All right. Zach asks, what Mac are you on? What are the specs? Well, let's take a look about this Mac. I am still on OS 10.14 Mojave. That's the previous version of the operating system. I'll come back to that. This is an iMac Pro 2017 3 gigahertz Intel Xeon W 10-core processor with 32 gigabytes of 2666 megahertz DDR4 RAM. Graphics card is a Radeon Pro Vega 64, 16 gigabytes. The internal drive is a 1 terabyte SSD. I hope, does that answer your question? So, in regards to operating systems, let's talk about that. I'm actually on the previous one, and that is not unusual for me because some of my drivers for my audio gear still are not certified to work with the newest version of the operating system. So, don't get all aggro on upgrading your operating system if you are doing paid work that you have to deliver to clients because you'll create a headache for yourself. So my Universal Audio Apollo X6, the current drivers actually generally work, but they have not fully certified them yet, so I'm waiting. And I've actually heard some complaints from people, even just not audio people, but that the Catalina has been a little bit rockier versus some of their previous operating systems, but I'm not in a hurry to upgrade. And so anyway, just some thoughts there from a music or from an audio recording standpoint. You hear that? Pretty noisy truck or something going by. All right. Eric Johnson, how good are the Rode VideoMic NTG or the D3 Pro when boom mounted to record indoor dialogue? How would they compare to the Audio-Technica AT3035 that you think so highly of? Actually, it's the 4053B that I think highly of. They're actually fairly similar. Good grief, it's the day of loud cars going by. I think that they're kind of different. So obviously the VideoMic NTG and the VMic D3 Pro are both shotgun microphone designs. So they have the interference tube. The trick with that is that if you're in a super reverberant space, when sound starts coming in the side of the interference tubes, you start to potentially get some phasing weirdness. Now, it's not super common. If you manage your room, it's not going to be an issue. In another airplane, it's like Curtis is doing a live stream. Let's fly our airplane over his house. And it's especially if you misaim the mic, that's when you're generally going to see it. So if you start having someone talking to the side of it, basically, because it's gotten misaimed somehow, that's when you're going to get this sort of warbling phase interference, comb filtering sound. That's the biggest issue. The 4053B will be less likely to run into that because it doesn't use an interference tube. But I think the voicing on the 4053B is a little bit more natural. I noticed that the NTG, the VideoMic NTG, and those tend to have a little bit of a bass boost to them. Not a bad sound, it's just a different sound. I feel like the AT4053B was a little more natural, but this is all very subjective. So obviously the difference is that the Audio-Technica 4053B has a balanced XLR output, so I can run a longer cable. We're going to have to be very careful with that on the VideoMic NTG or the VMic D3 Pro, unless you convert it to a balanced signal. So those are just some thoughts there. But I think sound-wise, they can all do a pretty good job. Very acceptable for sure. All right, Paul says to Alejandro, and you can do both things Curtis mentioned with one triggering via the other via BNC, like an F8 feeding to the F4's channels 5 and 6 that are good for that purpose. I'm trying to think of like F8 feeding to the F4's channels 5 and 6. I have to think through that one. Thank you, Paul. Think through the details on that. All right, Kevin. Kevin talks about connecting the USB to the MixPre 3 via the headphone jack out, and it worked really well. Surprised the heck out of me. Okay, so you could, certainly use the headphone jack as a way to feed audio to another recorder or camera. That's another option too. Rob brings up an interesting point regarding prices, that the used market is going to become a buyer's market too. Good point. Okay. All right. You're welcome for the answer, and thanks for the question. Alan, MixPre aux in set to mic level has far less gain than the Cashmere XLR inputs. They sound good, but not awesome. Okay. Thank you, Alan. Appreciate the input there. Back to Alarm Clock Films. Another question regarding the MixPre. I was on set and wanted to use the X1X X2, I assume you mean X2 output, for headphones to a boom op, but couldn't send the mix to be sent out. Everything looked to be good. Thoughts? Let me see. I don't have my setup here right now, but let's see if we can get it. Just a second. Make sure the focus is good. We'll boot this guy up. This is a mix pre 3, so it's going to be a little different. Instead of X1, X2, it's going to be just the stereo output. All right. First of all, make sure that the stereo out is not muted. You can adjust the gain right there. Make sure the stereo out mode is set to audio. On the stereo out left, you'd probably want to send the left mix, I would assume. And the stereo out right, you'd probably want to send the right mix. But if you have some funny things going on there, you can choose which channels specifically you want to send. And I think that should be basically it. So that should have gotten the job done. Now, I assume you're using some sort of wireless system between the X1, X2 output and the boom op, of course. But those are the settings that you should need to set up and to make that happen. So hopefully that helps a little bit, Alan. Alarm Clock Films. If not, Sound Devices support's really good. They can help walk through some of the more intricate details, I guess. They'll probably ask you a lot of questions about how you have things set up, so you'll have to answer some questions. All right, yes, and thank you to Alan. Trevor says, all depends on how quickly people can get back to work and spending money again, not just personal issues, but if people are not spending, then businesses will suffer. And if businesses are not getting income, then small commercial work is going to be hard to come by. Agreed. Todd notes that B&H has the Kupo 40-inch riser C-stand turtle base kit, 15 pounds. Average weight of all the others are 20 plus pounds. Hey, thanks for that, Todd, for looking that up for us. Trevor, a lot of my friends in Europe that I met at the Anti-Axe Film Workshop are all out of work these days. It's a rough time on that front. A lot depends on everything is just on a pause and everything gets back to normal quickly, or for a lot of pauses become full stops, I suspect, but not sure. Yeah, so Alan asked specifically on the using the mix pre to send the headphone mix. Did you set the stereo out gain high enough to get headphone level? Okay, back to the mix pre and the Ambisonics plugin. There's some indication here from Paul that the NTSF1 will also work if you plug the right mic outputs to the right channels. And then you can digitally adjust gain even without the plugin. Okay, it's just a confirmation there. And convert A format to B format in post. The problem is A to B conversion at the recorder for monitoring. That's what you won't get. Oh, here's another auto align post is another option, another plugin that can help you line microphones up and sync in post. Good to know. Thank you for that. All right, Kevin, are you using the GH5 or the C200 right now for this live stream? Looks really good. This is the C200 right now. I should give some context to why we are using that. It's not just a streaming camera. You don't buy a $6,500 camera to do live streams typically. You can. And the reason I use it for this is that this is a secondary purpose because it has really good autofocus because I was having focus issues from time to time. The GH5 is a great camera, but its autofocus and face tracking is okay. On the Canon Cinema cameras, it's fantastic. But its main purpose is actually for corporate video, which of course now is all on hold while we're doing social distancing. So its main purpose is to do a lot of that corporate video. And the reason I have it for that is that I think it's a better fit for me than the cinema camera, than the Blackmagic cinema cameras, which don't do any autofocus. And when I'm solo operating, it's just one more thing to worry about. And I do have some people that will, do a lot of moving around during their interviews, and so it can be a real pain. And that solves that problem. That's one thing. Another thing is I don't really need to shoot in RAW when I'm doing corporate video. So really, a Blackmagic cinema camera is called a cinema camera, I think, for a reason, because really its workflow is built around a cinema style workflow. So those are some of the reasons why I went with a C200. And a while ago, I sold the Ursa Mini Pro. Not because the Ursa Mini Pro is a bad camera. It's a great camera. But it wasn't fitting my workflow all that well because I don't do a ton of narrative film. And when I do narrative film, I'm the sound guy, not the camera guy. So those are some thoughts there. Thanks for the question, Kevin. All right, two right. Paul, I agree, but monitoring 360 sound in the field is dicey at best. I avoid it and just listen with my ears in the open. Okay, interesting. These are things that I don't have experience with yet. So thanks for sharing the details there. Sheriff Vlogs, do you know why Nikon has bad audio or hiss in the preamp? And do you know if the Nikon Z50 have good audio? I currently have the Nikon D50-600, and it has a lot of hiss. I don't know. I wish I knew why, but no. I have the Nikon Z6, and its microphone input is horrible. It creates a ton of self-noise, like unacceptable amounts of self-noise. And so I do not record audio to that camera ever. I don't know if the Z50 is any different. I would expect not. I would expect it would have a lot of hiss as well. So if you are a Nikon shooter, which I also, for a long, long time, have been a Nikon shooter and still have the Z6, I would not rely on its microphone input. So sadly, I like Nikon, but man, they have messed that up. So Nikon, if you're listening, please do better on that. Alonzo JT, greetings from Italy. Thank you for joining us. Hope you're staying well and healthy there. Alan is also still on Mojave 10.14.6 for a few reasons. I think that's a pretty common thing you'll see on production machines. Very powerful MacBook Pro you've got there. Wow, actually that's the iMac Pro, not the MacBook Pro, just to clarify. Bangs Naughty Bits brings up a good point as well. Not all 3.5mm headphone jack outputs are created equal. Good thing to keep in mind. All right, we did get to that. I'm using Mojave 2 due to the issues with some AU VST plugins on OS 10.15. He's a music producer. Okay, see, that's a great example. So here's somebody who also, E67 does some music production, and that there are some issues with some of the audio units and VST plugins on OS 10, 10.15 Catalina. So he's still on Mojave as well. So I don't feel as crazy for staying on Mojave for so long because it's been out. I think Catalina's been out for 6 months now, right? More than that. Coming up on 7, I think. Anyway. Greg also suggests maybe the NTG3 plus the Rode Wireless Go if the host isn't moving, so you can mix between the two channels. The clarity from the NTG3 plus the presence without reverb from the wireless system. Okay, interesting. Interesting idea. I like that. Curtis, Paul was talking about daisy chaining two audio recorders. Okay, thank you for the clarification there. Okay, we're just about wrapping up here. Rob, were the drinking and beard scratching on your hilarious Andy Axe video Foley or recorded on the day? I need to go check that out. It's 100% Foley. I was shooting for a Mr. Bean feel. Okay, good. Curtis, where do you sell your used gear? I actually need to do that. I have been giving a lot of it away, to be honest. So, for example, when I'm done with this microphone review, my daughter wants to start doing music production, so she gets this. My wife wanted the other one, so she gets that. But my brother ends up, I've given a lot of it to my brother. I'd like to do it just online and open it up to more people, but it's been a little bit on the complicated side to make that work. But maybe we can make something work. But I did hear about a site recently called gearfocus.com, which I'm probably going to go check out and see about selling. I've had some bad experiences on eBay. I just like to stay away from eBay if I can from now on. So I know I used to sell my stuff on eBay, but Can't do it anymore. All right. I think my voice is just about had it. Probably need to go give that a rest. Thanks so much for everyone for joining. And I hope you get out there. Well, don't keep your distance from everybody. Stay safe, stay healthy. But use this time to really improve those sound skills. And thanks again for everyone who joined here today, contributed to the discussion, provided insights that I'm not able to provide. So thanks so much for that. Talk to you again real soon. Take care, everybody.